welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. One of my favorite things about the fall is getting manure out in the fields. Now you say, what? Manure spreading? Well, yeah, we need to get the lagoons emptied and we need to get fertility out for our crop and the right fertility for our crop. We're going to talk about some of the factors that you should consider when applying manure.
We also want to discuss how you're going to control perennials and biennials, winter annuals, those types of weeds. How are you going to do that in the fall? We'll talk about the best products to use today.
Well, the biggest thing to get under control is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about a commonly asked question from non-farmers. They wonder, how do farmers know when it's time to harvest?
If you're a non-farmer and you're driving by fields, you may say, wow, that field still looks pretty green, yet here's the combine running through harvesting in that field. And then there's another field that's all brown and it looks like it's dead, and they aren't harvesting that yet. And it gets to be a little bit confusing of, well, that plant looks like it's ready, and this plant doesn't look like it's ready, but the farmer's taking the one that's not ready. It's not so much about the plant. When you're harvesting grain, like corn, for example, you're concerned about the moisture level in the kernels of corn and the maturity in the kernels of corn rather than in the plant. The same can be true for soybeans. You can see some soybeans that still have stalks with a little bit of green in them versus stalks that look all brown, yet one may have a higher moisture percentage in the bean itself than another one. So farmers are typically looking at that moisture percentage in the seed when they're harvesting grain.
Then, of course, there's harvesting the whole plant or chopping the whole plant, like in the case of corn silage. So if a farmer has corn silage, he's looking at that entire plant. What's the grain moisture? What's the moisture of that entire plant? And so they're going to take corn silage off the field, usually several weeks before they take grain off the field if all they were harvesting is that corn for grain.
Well, and then when we look at alfalfa hay, it's a whole different story here too. Many of the alfalfa producers across the country will just look at a schedule and say, all right, I'm going to cut alfalfa every 28 days all through the summer. Why do they do that? Well, they're looking for that alfalfa just to start blooming, and then they want to harvest because they want to get the highest relative feed value. So they aren't so worried about what the moisture percentage is or if it's going to make seed or not. They're just concerned about where the feed value is going to be the best for the livestock they intend to feed the alfalfa hay to.
So the whole point here is there are a wide variety of crops that farmers are producing, and there are a wide variety of uses for many of these different crops. So it depends a lot on what that crop's going to get used for and how each farmer is going to handle that. So there are a lot of different ways to harvest and a lot of different techniques out there, but that's kind of the whole point here today, is just understanding that, you know, there are a lot of differences. So even though one crop might look ready to that particular farmer, it might not be, and for another farmer, he's absolutely going to get it at that time.
So when a farmer decides to harvest a crop, well, it really varies depending on which crop he's after. However, he won't get much of any harvest if he doesn't control weeds like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Regalia RX biofungicide activates a plant's natural defense system, limiting the effects of disease and improving overall plant health. Regalia RX complements your fungicide program to optimize yield and strengthen return on investment. Ask your retailer for Regalia RX today.
Presenting the new 2016 Apache sprayer. If you could save money and increase yield, why wait? Delaying change can cost you money.
It's phenomenal the return of investment it brings back. In my mind, a sprayer is the biggest return of investment you can bring back.
Apache owners apply in half the time of a full type, apply when they want versus custom, and spend less than Hydrostat owners, not to mention less weight on their crops. Go ahead and compare. We hope you do. Visit etsprayers.com to locate a dealer and how to save with an Apache. Apache, now more than ever.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots from Monsanto Bioegg is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more, and is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Get Quick Roots today.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a SoilMax Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with SoilMax. Visit soilmax.com.
When we use agriculture liquid, we'll usually end up with 2.7 to 3 pounds of gain per animal a day. We had 100 head out on a pasture this last fall that gained at 2.7. You know, they made about $450. We usually get about a 10-day start. It's ready 10 days early, and we're grazing and they're waiting and we're gaining.
Your time is valuable. That's why you need a Hagie STS application system. Hagie STS products are designed for precision and efficiency, allowing you to make applications all season long with just one machine. Contact your Hagie rep today.
When Darren and I were growing up on the farm, our job was hogs. We had to manage the hogs, and that was lots of fun, wasn't it, Darren?
That means
Scooping hog manure.
We get to scoop hog manure in the morning. We get to scoop manure when we got back from school at night.
On the weekends,
there's
Sundays,
a lot of scooping.
yeah.
Then we get to spread it out in fields. I mean, it's a pretty fun thing.
So when you drive onto our farmyard, you would absolutely smell those hogs. And what our dad would say is, well, boys, that's the smell of money. But you know what? Here's what I've learned over the years. That's not the smell of money. That's the smell of lost money. The point is, if you can smell manure, you've got nutrients that are potentially going up into the air, especially nitrogen. We worry a lot about ammonia out there. Well, what is ammonia? It's got some nitrate in it. We don't want to lose that. We want to tie that up. We want to bind it to our soil. We don't want it going anywhere else other than in our soil. That's what we want to talk about today.
All right, so when we think about the manure that's getting spread on farms across the country, you may be asking, well, why are farmers spreading it now? Why don't they spread it later? Or why don't they spread it next spring? In many cases, livestock operations have lagoons or have tanks or have pits that are getting full, and they need to get some of those nutrients out in the field. Now's a good time to get that done. There's still time to get it out in the soil before things freeze up. And that's really the key here, is we want to apply the manure before we have frozen ground to avoid having some issues. So like Brian said, we don't want to lose any of the manure or lose any of the nutrients in the manure or cause any environmental issues. The biggest way we can do that is if we do apply it over frozen ground. Now, if we happen to get some moisture and we have that warm day, that moisture could run off and the manure has not had a chance to bind into that soil.
Okay, so here are our top 3 tips. Number 1, you've got to do it before you have frozen ground. Number 2, we want to inject that manure. We don't like manure left on the soil surface. We want that manure injected. And I know some people will lay it on the soil surface and work it in. If you're going to do that, work it in deep. Okay, we don't want it just worked in an inch or something like that, because now you've got all your phosphorus in that top inch of soil. That's not a good thing. And then the third thing is consider using some type of stabilizer. So there are many companies out there that sell nitrogen stabilizers. There are also companies that sell products for phosphorus. So one good example is More Than Manure, that can help prevent your nitrogen loss. It's a nitrogen stabilizer, but then it also can help your phosphorus so that doesn't get tied up in the soil, so that can be more available for this next crop. Oh, I guess I should really throw in one 4th tip too. That's this. Make sure that you're testing your soil and your manure. We don't want you over applying manure, just like we don't want you over applying any nutrient out there. What we've learned on our own farm is we're way ahead to cut the rate down on manure and then supplement with commercial fertilizers so we can spread that manure over more acres, because we only have a little bit of manure and lots of acres. So if you're in that situation, spread it out over more ground, supplement with commercial fertilizer, and usually you're better off. But make sure you're testing.
Well, the other thing, Brian, about adding some commercial fertilizer to the equation is just to even things out. Many times with manure, we see fields that end up being just a little bit up and down because the fertility value is not exactly the same all the way through that manure, and maybe the spread isn't exactly the same. Putting out commercial fertilizer for a portion of the program really evens things out a little bit, so we take away some of those problems.
Here's the other way that evens it out, Darren, because in a lot of cases we'll find, like the manure that we get, okay, that might be really high in potassium, but it doesn't have a whole lot of phosphorus. So if guys put out there enough to cover their phosphorus need, well, they probably put 3 times as much potassium as they actually needed. So what we're trying to say is we want you to put the right amount out for the crop, not a ridiculous, crazy amount so you're going to have environmental issues and that kind of thing. We want you to have everything balanced. So a lot of times what that means is the combination of manure and commercial fertilizer.
The other drawback of over-applying manure is salt. In many cases when we're applying manure, there's quite a bit of salt that's in that manure. And if we over-apply, we can really damage our soils and our crops for years to come. So take a look at what the salt content is when you get your manure tested for nutrients, and then don't over-apply it. When we look at pounds of salt per acre, how much can you really tolerate? Well, we get that question all the time. It depends on what crop you're placing out there. It depends on what your drainage is and what your soil situations are. So it's going to vary from area to area and crop to crop. I would just say this, when you look at the salt that you're applying, let's just say, for example, your manure had 300 pounds per acre of salt that's going to be in the spread that you're going to put out there. I would just think of it this way. You put all the fertility out. Would you also like to put 300 pounds of salt on your ground? No, I wouldn't. I don't want much salt at all. Well, then cut back your rate of manure so you don't exceed how much salt your ground can tolerate, and so you don't damage your crop or soils.
Okay, when it comes to the application of this manure, like we say, we really like to have it injected, and where personally I like to have it injected is deeper. The main reason why is because phosphorus today is the #1 water quality issue we have in the United States. And unless you way overdo it for phosphorus isn't moving in your soil, okay? So if you put it down in that 6 to 12 inch range, especially in heavy soils, it's pretty well locked in there forever until a crop uses it up. Or maybe a weed, but hopefully we're killing those weeds, right? Well, anyway, my point here is I want you to test your soil. And what I'd suggest doing, even on a little bit of ground, is test every 3 inches going down. Test the top 3 inches, the next 3, the next 3, the next 3. My guess is almost all your fertilizers in the top 3 inches. Okay, well, if it's in the top 3 inches, why put more there? Put more down deeper to lead your roots down deeper. You're going to make your crop a lot more drought tolerant, and you're also going to prevent environmental issues because phosphorus, for the most part, doesn't move in the soil, again, unless you're 10 or 50 times overdoing it. We just don't have any issues as long as you're putting the right rate on.
The other thing I'd like to mention is when you're getting the manure sample analyzed for nutrients, get a complete analysis. There's a lot more in that manure than just NP and K. We'd like to see what those are, because that's going to impact your entire fertility program for your farm.
Well, once again, when we talk about the entire fertility program for the farm, manure is a great way to go. If you have access to manure, you're gonna love it, but just make sure you test it, test your soil, don't overdo it. Supplement with some commercial fertilizer, and chances are things are going to turn out great. And remember that smell of manure is not the smell of money, it's the smell of lost money.
Well, the other thing with manure we hear a lot is, hey, if I put manure out, there's a lot of fertility out there and possibly even some weed seeds in the manure. Our weed of the week is probably not one of those weeds that is common in manure, but we still need to get it under control. We'll show you how later in the show.
Stop coring your bins with the Agri-Dry Gravity Grain Spreader. Traditional bin filling systems create uneven concentrations of grain and fine particulates. Uniform grain distribution allows even airflow throughout the entire bin, giving you more control over temperature and moisture content, increasing your grain quality and bottom line. Call us today for more information.
Dry Load Store, 1-855 Agri-Dry.
Working in agriculture over the past 3 decades, I saw a need for an accurate way to apply dry product to seed. That's where our Changing Times applicators come in. The CT applicator brush sifts powder into small particles, resulting in proper distribution. Quantities can be adjusted by the speed of the brush rotation. This allows for even and accurate distribution of product. Application at the time of planting can be used with any seed delivery system and saves farmers time, labor, and money. Remember, CT applicators for the Changing Times.
When you need one machine that can do it all, you send in a Spartan, your all-in-one forage solution from Capello, USA. This direct cutting system is the right machine for almost any forage crop and gets everything done in a single pass, keeps your costs down. Always versatile, the Spartan can be configured to fit any self-propelled forage harvester in the world. So, no matter what you forage, send in a Spartan from Capello, USA. Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
We've been dealing with AgriLiquid a little over 7 years. I was skeptical, to be honest, but I watched the results from several clients. Those results were increased production and reduction in input cost. With AgriLiquid, we've saw an increase in the size of the initial root mass. For ranchers, that means forage production a lot quicker. AgriLiquid works. The bottom line is profitability.
farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
How are you going to control perennials and winter annuals all season long? Well, the best time to do it is in the fall.
Whenever you're talking about a weed with a multi-year life cycle, fall is such a critical time because that particular weed is trying to take in water, take in nutrients, and store them up so the plant can be healthy through the winter and get a good jump on your crop next spring.
The whole point here is, hey, yeah, it is going to take nutrients and it's going to try to store a lot of that up down in its root, but we have to get that weed when it's still actively growing. So that's the real key. This is very time sensitive here. If you want to kill perennials or biennials, and everybody says fall is a great time, that's the way to go. Well, yes, but early fall, not late fall, depending on where you're at in the country. We just don't want to have a hard killing frost, no more good growth, then you're not going to have as good a result.
Now, when we look at the perennials and the biennials, they're big, tough plants, and there aren't as many herbicide options as there are for annual weeds. And you may be thinking, well, boy, I don't know if I can kill those weeds completely this fall. That's the other reason we're talking about trying it in the fall, because even if you don't completely kill them, we also have winter coming, and hopefully the stress of winter and freezing in the northern part of the country is going to finish the job, even if you don't completely kill these weeds.
If we're talking about biennials or perennials, we've got to have something that's going to go down into the root. Our best suggestion for you is a very high rate of Roundup, the highest labeled rate, and don't cry that, oh, I have to put on so much product. It only costs a few dollars. Roundup is as cheap as it's been almost ever in history, so go ahead and get that at the maximum labeled rate. In non-crop ground, let's say it's pasture ground and you want to kill perennials or biennials, our best suggestion is something like Tordon or Milestone. Tordon is great for most weeds, but if you have thistles, Milestone's just a little bit better. So I'd take a look at those products first. Now let's get to the winter annuals.
If we can get top growth control and just burn them down to the ground, that will be sufficient in most cases. Now, it just comes down to how you want to do that. If you want a strictly burn down product, you could use something like Roundup, you could use something like Gramoxone. If you want something that also has residual though, you may be looking at using one of the Authority products or Valor or any number of options that would give you some residual going into the spring as well.
Okay, you haven't even covered my favorite option, Darren, and that is straight Banville in the fall. So we had some issues a few years ago with a lot of mare's tail. If you hit it with an enormous rate of Banville in the fall, and I'm talking a quart per acre, not that pint rate that you use in corn. Now keep in mind too, Banville is way down in price from just this spring, so it's going to be a lot more economical than you may have thought just a few months ago. But if you hit it real hard with that Banville in the fall, especially if you're going to rotate into corn, not only are you going to get burned down to the ground, but you're also going to leave yourself some residual. You will pretty much wipe out a lot of the mare's tail problem on your farm. If you're going to go to beans next spring, I'm not real big on putting Banville out in the fall because it's possible you might have a little carryover into those beans. So I'd rather see you do 2,4-D. 2,4-D typically doesn't last quite as long in the soil. If it was me, I'd do a couple quarts of LV6 as long as it's labeled in your area.
Certainly hitting it hard with a Banville or a 2,4-D can work very well. One of those weeds that you might just be after is our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to get it under control coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters, without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our Weed of the Week is Creeping Charlie.
All right, now if you had Creeping Charlie out in a field situation and you can do a burn down, that's one thing. But many times you see Creeping Charlie even in the yards around people's houses. And when you're in a yard, using a Roundup, for example, as a great burn down option and a great Creeping Charlie control option, well, not many people want to do that to their yard because there's grass there that they would like to keep and they don't want to have to start all over. Now, we had it happen a few years back when my great uncle was alive. He was looking at his yard and he'd been fighting some Creeping Charlie, but not really hitting it very hard. And it just seemed to continue spreading in his yard. And he finally decided, I'm just going to spray Roundup and kill the whole thing and start over. I don't think his wife was too excited about him starting the yard all over, especially when they were well into their 80s, but he did it anyway, and it was effective at controlling Creeping Charlie. However, most people would like to not have to spray Roundup and kill the whole yard and start over. So if you'd like to do that, right now is the best time of year to start. Start in the fall. Creeping Charlie is thriving right now, and it's storing up nutrients for the future. So get out there in the fall with a good, strong rate of 2,4-D. I would suggest the maximum labeled rate. I like to use amine. Brian prefers to use ester. Either way should work just fine. Now's a good time of year because your flowers aren't blooming anymore. Your trees are starting to drop their leaves. It's fall. It's a good time to kill weeds and not have to worry as much about any off-target drift. We are still concerned. We want to be safe and everything, but now's a really good time to start. Then next spring, you're going to see some Creeping Charlie come back because 2,4-D is just not that systemic. It's not going to get all through that extensive root system and kill every plant. So you hit it again early spring, then you may have to hit it again once in the summer, then you're going to have to hit it again next fall, and chances are by that time, after several applications of 2,4-D, the Creeping Charlie is nearly gone. I would say this is likely going to be a 2 to 3 year process for you with multiple applications through the season, with your strongest applications being in the fall and early spring.
All right, here's the whole key to this thing. You got to have the right rate. Unless you're slightly turning your grass brown, chances are you're not up to the maximum labeled rate. So I just make sure you're pushing that rate to make sure you're at that top end rate. Also, don't buy the watered down stuff, okay? Get the real stuff, mix it at a good strong rate, and don't use too much water. Here's one other quick tip for you. A lot of people will say, oh, go use Banville or some dicamba and that'll work better. Yep, it will work better, but it's also way more dangerous for you. So if you're gonna have somebody apply it who's got all kinds of personal protective equipment on, or who's gonna do it with a sprayer on a tractor, that's a different deal, okay? But if you're hand spraying it yourself, no possible way I'm ever using Banville or dicamba. It's way more dangerous for you. Use 2,4-D, way safer option. You don't have a lot of big risk there. We still want you using personal protective equipment, but it's a lot safer option, so that's the way we would go.
Okay, we're talking 2,4-D, we're talking Banville, but don't use those things out in the field. You can use them for an extra boost. We would still like to get a very strong rate of Roundup in the fall before the first hard killing frost. As we've been talking throughout the show, that's your best option for killing Creeping Charlie in a field.
In the field, though, we don't really worry too much because most of the time we have good crop canopy and that'll choke it out. It's just in lawns, we do have some issues. Make sure you're using good fertilizer in your lawn, do some soil testing, fertilize the right way, and then also don't cut your lawn too short. When you do that, then it means weeds like Creeping Charlie can really get a good start.
That's all the time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
When it comes to harvesting your crop, you want to make sure the grain is wet enough that you're not giving up dollars at the elevator. In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss harvesting wet grain and storing it safely. All right, I realize when we talk about harvesting grain a little bit wetter, it makes everybody nervous, and me included, because they're worried about spoilage in the bin or docks at the elevator. Here's the solution. While most farmers have fans on their grain bins, and the fans are tremendous tools, trying to operate them manually is often a struggle. On our farm, we've tried to manage this for years, but it's virtually impossible to be very accurate because of the constant monitoring it takes. You need to pay attention to temperature and relative humidity because it's easy to get the grain too dry, meaning lots of lost income. What we've done is what many other farmers have done as well: invest in automatic bin fan controls. We're using AgriDry systems on our bins, And since we've started, we've been shocked at how often the fans turn on and off when trying to get the grain to just the right moisture. Since AgriDry systems monitor temperature and humidity, they're able to use the fans to either add moisture or take moisture away. So with our soybeans, we can harvest at 14 or 15%, leading to better seed quality and less harvest loss. Or on corn, where we were often drying corn down to 12 or 13%, now we don't have to anymore because we can just turn on the AgriDry system and take the last point or two off. Modern technology is great when used properly, and automatic bin fan controls, in our opinion, are the way to go. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
What if instead of running test plots on 10 acres, you could test on 10,000? With Farmers Business Network, the world becomes your plot trial. FBN is the independent farmer-to-farmer agronomic network. FBN connects real data from tens of thousands of fields and provides you trusted analysis on hundreds of seeds, practices, and field performance to maximize your profits. Find out how your field seeds and practices compare today by joining the FBN community at farmersbusinessnetwork.com. Just $500 per year for unlimited acres.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
There are no marks of conflict lining this landscape. No echoes of economic hardship. Just the unmistakable murmur of Mother Nature's hand. In the perennial quest to outperform, ensure your crop gets the nutrients it craves with a Veil Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Nothing helps protect your investment more, so you can grow confidently no matter what comes your way. A Veil. Hold your ground.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots from Monsanto Bioegg is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more, and is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Get Quick Roots today.
Presenting the new 2016 Apache sprayer. If you could save money and increase yield, why wait? Delaying change can cost you money.
It's phenomenal the return of investment it brings back. In my mind, a sprayer is the biggest return of investment you can bring back.
Apache owners apply in half the time for full type, apply when they want versus custom, and spend less than hydrostat owners, not to mention less weight on their crops. Go ahead and compare. We hope you do. Visit etsprayers.com to locate a dealer and how to save with an Apache. Apache, now more than ever.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. You'll find us each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics Iron Talk, and much more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Fertilizer is a term commonly used to describe plant food. Did you realize all growing plants require primary, secondary, and micronutrients in order to grow properly and produce food for humans? For more information, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.